After last week's Bucks County Bigfoot episode, viewers took to my comment section to mention UFO sightings in the area and also to share some of their own stories. Bucks County is home to one of the most famous UFO flaps in history, the Warminster sightings. But people all over the county have reported seeing strange lights and objects in the skies for years. So this week, I'm going to be looking at some of the stranger sightings in Bucks County, including a really odd viewer story. What's going on in Bucks County? Stay tuned and find out right now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. This week, I'm staying in Pennsylvania, remaining in Bucks County. We had a great episode last week about some Bigfoot sightings there. And this week, I want to talk about the UFO sightings in Bucks County. Bucks County is infamous for its UFO sightings. They had a very large flap in the Warminster area back in the mid-'60s. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to get into some more contemporary sightings as well as a viewer story. So stay tuned. Let's get into some UFO sightings in Bucks County. Okay, so we really can't talk about UFOs in Bucks County without talking about the Warminster UFO flap. The bulk of it occurred between 1965 and 1967 in Warminster. Lots of UFO sightings in that area, but also from some of the nearby communities, including Ivyland, Southampton, Warrington, and other parts of like central Bucks County. So this really sort of started because Warminster was home to the Naval Air Development Center, often called the NADC, Johnsville. It was one of the U.S. Navy's premier aviation research facilities. So it's an air base. It tested helicopters, different types of experimental aircraft systems, experimental technologies. So because of this, a lot of the skeptics say that a lot of these sightings that happened there were simply secret military projects. But others, who witnessed these UFOs described objects that performed maneuvers well beyond what known aircraft at the time could perform. So it's kind of like this little isolated Area 51 in Pennsylvania, because you have this base that the government acknowledges, but there's things in the sky that are doing things that can't be explained. And I'm just going to give an overview here because there are tons of different reports and I can't go through each and every one of them. A lot of them are not like really fleshed out, but I can just kind of go over some of the basics of what people were reporting. People were seeing these bright white lights, orange glowing objects, silent discs moving through the sky, hovering over the farmlands. And then these lights and these discs would accelerate at impossible speeds. So these don't really sound like conventional aircraft, especially of the time. I mean, we're in 2026 now, but you go back, 60 years, very different technologies back then, but people were seeing these things. And it wasn't just one or two witnesses. You had a lot of people seeing these objects hovering silently and then accelerating at speeds that were not really possible at the time. And again, it becomes a flap because of the sheer number of independent witnesses, all reporting similar things over, in the skies, over their homes, over their farmland. They're seeing these things, orange lights, white lights, discs, very, very, very strange. Another hallmark we have here is it's not, these witnesses were not isolated. You had entire families seeing things. You had neighbors all sort of coming out of their homes and witnessing these things together. Police officers, you had groups gathered outdoors, people driving. I mean, there were lots of sightings. That's why it's a flap. It's not just one or two independent sightings. But a lot of these things that people were seeing, they reported no engine noise, no navigation lights, sudden turns, like right angles, again, things that modern aircraft or even aircraft at the time cannot do. Lots of these things hovering over wooded areas. So within this flap, we have what's called the Christmas Eve booms. And these were sounds that were heard on Christmas Eve, 1965. And people reported sounds like huge explosions, deep concussive booms. They reported their houses were shaking, the windows were rattling, dishes in the kitchen were vibrating. Lots of people thought something had exploded nearby. But But, subsequent investigations yielded no crash site. So it wasn't an airplane that came down and crashed. There were no reported explosions in the area. No earthquakes were on record, and no aircraft accidents. So again, nothing came down, and again, in the 60s, you had a lot of rocket launches. You had a lot of satellites going up. You had, this is post World War II, Cold War kind of coming on and really taking hold. So you had a lot of this sort of paranoia of things falling from the sky, but there was really nothing there. This does sound like aircraft testing, though. This sounds like supersonic planes taking off, landing at the nearby aircraft base, breaking the sound barrier, and these sonic booms happening, which, even today, people hear them and they're not really sure what to make of them. So very interesting. So the explanations for the booms ranged from secret military testing, atmospheric phenomena like skyquakes, sonic booms, as I mentioned, artillery testing, things like that. So interesting, but you do have the air base there. So at least for this aspect of it, I would probably say this is just supersonic aircraft causing these booms. But because you have the peripheral UFO sightings and weird things in the skies, it gets lumped in with the Warminster flap. And again, the flap, really, the bulk of it was 65 to 67. But, people were seeing stuff before then. People continue to see stuff to this day. It's not as prominent, but people do see things. And like I said, in my previous video, Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania, Bucks County, a lot of people took to the comments and said, hey, I don't know if much, Bigfoot activity in Bucks County, but there's a lot of UFO sightings. And a few people did share their stories. We're going to get to one of those stories tonight. But I do want to just, get into some more stories around the area. Washington's Crossing, places like that, Quakertown. So let us move into those now. Okay, so to talk about a more contemporary Warminster UFO sighting, I'm going to New Fork, the National UFO Reporting Center website, and they have a sighting here that took place on June 25th, 2016, Warminster, Pennsylvania, and this was a rectangle. And the witness says there were lights on the object, there was an aura or haze around it, says it was glowing orange, square-like, flying in the sky. So again, we heard this back in the 60s, these orange lights in the sky, and now we're hearing this again. So the witness says, noticed an orange glowing flying object in the sky moving very slowly from east to west in my backyard, very high up. Videotaped it briefly on my phone and grabbed binoculars in the house. Came out in from the house to catch a glimpse. What I thought was round appeared to be square, like an object in the binoculars. Lost sight of it as it passed tree site. Definitely not a plane. So he's seeing this thing, and at first he's saying it looked almost round. And then through the binoculars, he's getting a better look at this and he can see that it's more square or rectangular. And I've covered square / rectangular, more rectangular UFOs on the show before. You can go to my playlist and lots of UFO episodes. And some of those have these rectangular objects, which we don't hear a lot. It's usually the discs or the triangles, the cigar shaped cylinders. We don't typically hear rectangular. So this is really interesting. But again, it's orange. And this just tracks back to the Warminster flap of the mid 60s. So very interesting. And I just love when stories sort of connect like this. Doesn't seem to be a person who's looking back and saying, oh, I'm going to make up this story about an orange light in Warminster because that's where these sightings were. Again, most people don't know about these things. And even from my episode last week, people were just like, hey, I've been living here for years and I didn't know there were Bigfoot sightings in Bucks County. And, they're online. You can find them, quick Google search. You will see these things. But when you live there, you're not always aware of that these things are in your area, especially if it's not on your radar. If you're not a big, researcher into Bigfoot or UFOs, you may just not know about it. Back in the 60s, this was big. And for nerds like me, paranormal nerds, I was always aware of Bucks County. And I drove through Bucks County when I was younger, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, cool. This is where those UFO flaps were. So I was aware of it because I'm, a paranormal nerd. But the average person is not necessarily going to be aware. So I thought this was really cool because it does tie back to the history of the UFO sightings in Warminster, there in Bucks County, PA. So very cool sighting. All right, this next story is just from a little over a year ago, March 14th of 2025. This comes to us from Kintnersville, And this is really near Ottsville. And that town came up a lot in the comments from last week. People mentioned Ottsville a lot. So I said, let me pull this story. Uh, the observers here, there were two observers, a pilot and an aviation expert. So gives it some credibility. So this was a white light. They say it was about 200 feet long. They viewed it from land. They think it was about 1 to 2 miles away. There were lights on the object, and they say it was a compacted, thin, horizontal line of lights hovering in the sky. And again, this sounds like something, but we're going to get to that. So they say the area is a quiet rural community in Bucks County, surrounded by farms, equestrian operations, country homes on larger parcels of land. There are almost no urban, congested commercial communities within a few miles in all directions. Our shop is an outbuilding on a previously subdivided parcel that was once an active farm. This shop is where we tinker and repair almost anything of household value, like small engines, yard machines, generators, tools, etc. I also paint. I'm a retired artist / pro photographer. My experience in aircraft is extensive. I was an imaging specialist and photographer / consultant. I've spent countless hours in aircraft of various configurations for 30 plus years, operating as a photographer, very skilled with uncanny awareness of structure. I exited our shop around sunset and noticed the lighted object to my right or east of my property. It was silently hovering, let's say 1,000 feet above and about 2 miles west of me. The sky was very clear as the sun set with dramatic backdrop of clouds far behind the object. I walked towards the house, barking at my pal, already inside the house, that we have guests tonight, and I am retrieving a camera from my truck. I returned to the shop's exterior, and using a utility pole, I firmly held the camera to the pole and recorded the enclosed images. The interesting thing is, these sightings are so common for me that I rarely even mention them anymore. My closer friends have been accustomed to my seeing UAP pics just as anyone else exhibits photos of their grandchildren. I've previously submitted some of my pics to a local MUFON rep, who has verbally verified their authenticity, called my pics impressive, and thrilled they are in relative close proximity to his locale. So a few things. It somewhat sounds like Starlink, horizontal line of lights. But one, the sun had set, but he's saying there's this dramatic backdrop. So I don't know how visible Starlink would be. This is also someone, an aviation expert, a pro photographer, and they submitted their photo here. And the photo is really what makes me think maybe this isn't Starlink, because I've seen tons of Starlink photos. I have friends who photograph Starlink. My buddy Scott has photographed it and sent it to me. So it looks very distinct. So I'm going to show you guys the picture of what this person took. And this looks very different. Starlink, if it streaks, it all goes in one direction. I mean, these are, satellites orbiting the Earth. They're moving in a straight line. This, whatever he photographed, this looks like it's bouncing around left and right and up and down. And again, maybe this is his camera shaking. I can't imagine that if this is somebody who takes photography really seriously. He's leaning up against a pole, and I'm guessing he said that to sort of imply, like, hey, I was holding this camera steady. This is not bouncing around. There's another little light here to the left of it, and that is not moving. So, and usually nighttime photos on a camera phone, they're going to do a long exposure. Anytime I take pictures at night without the flash, it usually stays open for 3-4 seconds, and you can get this sort of streaking. And this just looks like it's moving in, this is not a conventional aircraft. I don't believe it's Starlink. Don't know what it is. Chinese lanterns maybe, but again, in 3 to 4 seconds, that looks to be moving a bit erratically. And it's orange. He's saying when he saw it, it looked white or a soft white. And this looks a little bit more like amber, yellowish, orange tinted. So not sure about this one. If you're just going by the text here, I would say Starlink, but the photo, that does not look like Starlink. I'll throw up some Starlink photos here so you guys can see what Starlink looks like when it's photographed. It is very different than this. This looks like a concentrated object that is kind of moving, and the open shutter just has it streaking. So really interesting story here. I like this one. And again, not that an aviation expert or a pilot or a photographer is a better witness necessarily, but I do think it just adds a little bit into their they could still be wrong is basically what I'm saying. um they're not infallible, they're not perfect, but I do think it gives them a little bit more credibility than the average person who may not know what Starlink looks like. I've again covered some stories on this channel that were clearly Starlink, and they have the picture at the end, and you're like, that's Starlink. And it makes you wonder why the people on this website haven't debunked that. Sometimes they do; they'll put it at the very bottom. Like if I scroll down here, sometimes like right above this posted date, it'll say, "We believe this is Starlink," but this doesn't look like it to me. So let me know what you guys think of this one, because I don't know what to make of this story here. Okay, so our next story comes to us from Yardley, Pennsylvania, and this is near Washington's Crossing. And I mentioned Washington's Crossing last week, and a lot of people in the comments mentioned Washington's Crossing, and they were talking about ghosts and haunted houses and paranormal stuff, which I'm not really touching on in this episode. But Washington's Crossing is really cool. I went there this past Christmas. Beautiful, beautiful area. You can totally see how there's like ghost stories and maybe lights in the sky and maybe even Bigfoot. It's just a really beautiful, wild area. It's nice. It's not too overdeveloped. I mean, it's developed, but this one is like just south of Washington's Crossing. So I wanted to throw this one in here. And this one comes to us from April 28th of 2021. Two observers, Yardley, Pennsylvania, and they say red lights flickering in Bucks County. And they say, last night while walking my dog, I saw what appeared to be a rocket because it appeared to be flying up straight. But having seen a rocket launch before, I knew that wasn't the case. They are loud and there are obvious flames shooting from below. The thing I saw last night then began flying across the night sky above my head. The top of it was a smattering of red and orange lights. They each flickered separately. It was as close, if not closer, than most of the planes that fly overhead. The base of the shape from which the lights came up from appeared black and to be shaped in an upward arch. All of the lights filled an almost circular space/cluster above that arch. There was no brightness around the lights, meaning the sky didn't appear lighter around the lights. And it moved rather slowly, didn't dart quickly or have a tail like a shooting star or meteor. Didn't hear anything coming from it. I tried to chase after it, but I wasn't able to keep up, and it disappeared behind some trees. So this is a weird one, and I know sometimes people will see like the SpaceX launches or other launches, and they look weird. Like the second stage booster goes off, and it just looks like this weird luminous jellyfish in the sky or spiral, or it can look weird. But he's saying this is almost like just an object. There's no plume, there's no flames. It's just this object with red and orange lights, which again we heard in the Warminster sightings, a lot of red and orange, more orange, but we heard this time and time again. He's saying it looked closer. If this was like SpaceX or something else, it would probably be in the distance. Again, I have friends, my buddy Scott, they've seen SpaceX launches and it's beautiful, but it's clearly that. It's not like, hey, what the heck is that object? It's clearly like a plume of something. So not sure what to make of this one. He's saying it appeared black and shaped in an upward arch. So not sure. All of the lights filled an almost circular space/cluster above that arch. So it sounds like a really bizarre object. It doesn't really match anything that we know of. Not sure what to make of this one, but very close to Washington's Crossing. Dark skies there at night. He's saying it didn't light up the sky around it, which usually the brighter lights will do that, or the flames coming from a rocket would do that. He's saying it also didn't dart quickly. It's just kind of moving up. Weird story. So let me know what you guys think of this one. But this one is near Washington's Crossing, where a lot of weird stuff happens. Again, people in the comments said the ghost stories, but also just weird noises and high strangeness. I always try to ask follow-up questions in the comments so that I get more information. And sometimes people don't respond, and I get that. You're going on with your lives. But yeah, if you do leave a comment, I would love as much detail as possible, because I would like to feature your stories. I would love to learn about these places that are not always online. Sometimes just hearing from the locals is great, because those communities can be insular and they don't go and post on sites like this or the BFRO or whatever. So you have this local current folklore of weird stuff happening, and it never really gets out there. But people have been commenting about Washington's Crossing and just some high strangeness around the area. So I would really love to dig into that more. All right, I promised you guys a viewer story, and I'm going to read this one now. This comes to us courtesy of X Liquid X Schwartz X, and he commented on my Bucks County Bigfoot episode and says, "Well, I got a story that ain't Bigfoot related, but it's about Bucks. My mother used to live there. Me and my ex went to visit, so we sat in the living room and hung out. Eventually, I felt like smoking, so I excused myself and walked out front. My half sister's husband had his car in the driveway, so I walked up to the driver's side and leaned back with the back of my head resting on the hood so I could look up at the stars. It was night, so I'm looking up as I'm smoking, just stargazing. I see a white light that looks like a plane just coasting along at airplane speed. So I'm looking at this thing, and all of a sudden, it rapidly made a 75-degree turn and corkscrewed upward and out of the atmosphere. This thing was moving. I want to say something like 1,000 miles per hour. At such a wild angle, it looked like a Nike swoosh. And I'll throw that up here just so you guys know what he's talking about. Straight up and was gone in an instant. I put out my cigarette and slowly walked in the house with my eyes slightly watering. Everyone asked me if I was all right. I said, yeah, I'm okay, fighting back some tears, because when you see something like this, it rocks your world. Like an age-old question, are they real? And I felt blessed to receive that answer. That's why I almost cried. So something might sound silly to others, but as for me, UFOs from space are totally a thing. I never saw Chewbacca, but a spaceship, yep. So thank you, brother. I appreciate you sharing that story. It's a very cool story. And I like that he's not got UFOs on the brain. He's not out there looking for UFOs. He's just out there to, smoke a cigarette. And he's stargazing, and he sees this thing that at first he thinks is a plane, and he has no reason to think it's not a plane until it makes this like 75-degree turn and corkscrews upward out of the atmosphere really quickly. And he says this thing was moving, a wild angle, it's just this swoosh, And I share a story with him back about how I saw something similar in Connecticut, and I will link to that episode if you guys want to go back and check that out, because I go into more detail about what I saw, but it kind of almost looked like the Enterprise going to warp. It was just like a reverse shooting star almost. Very, very strange. But like I said, I will link to that episode down below so you guys can listen to that. But I like this story. Again, he's just seeing this weird thing. And I love stories when people see something and at first it's like, oh, that's just a plane or that's just a bear. And then this plane, does something completely impossible. Or the bear stands up on two legs and runs away. And it's like, that wasn't a bear. That wasn't a plane. I'm not saying this is extraterrestrial. I don't know. Interdimensional. I don't know. But this does not sound like something that we have created that can do this. Just don't know what to make of that. So I don't claim to know, but it's a UFO in my book. It's unidentified. It's flying, and it was an object. So make of it what you will. Liquid Schwartz here thinks it was aliens. I would tend to agree. I don't know if we have anything that sophisticated yet that can do something like that, but let us know what you think in the comments below. What do you think of Liquid Schwartz's story here? So thank you for sharing, brother. All right, this next story comes to us from New Hope, Pennsylvania. And again, New Hope was one of those towns that people mentioned in the comments more than once. So I was like, let me pay attention to this. And sure enough, there are some really good stories. Again, I'm just showcasing a sampling because there's tons of sightings in Pennsylvania. Even in Bucks County, there's probably hundreds. So I'm just kind of picking and choosing what people were interested in last week and focusing in on those. And this comes to us from August 15th, 1992. Two observers, New Hope, Pennsylvania. This is a triangle. And the witness says, this event has been bugging me for years. I was driving back to my parents' house with my girlfriend at the time. We'd just been out on a date, and it was a warm evening outside. I was driving my mother's minivan, and we had the windows down because it was nice out. The road my parents' house is on was, at the time, in a semi-rural suburban area. It was a very clear night with lots of stars, no moon from what I can recall. So nights like that are really nice. It's clear, you can see all the stars, but the moon isn't there to sort of wash out, the darkness. When we were about 2 miles away, I saw a dark shape above the tree line in the direction we were headed. Even though it was very dark, there was still some ambient light from Philadelphia on the horizon below the tree line. Because of that, I could define space that was much darker than the surrounding sky. So he's saying, the glow, when you're out there, you can see the glow of different towns, the light pollution, basically. And he's saying this thing was darker than the surrounding sky. So he can see it clearly. There's that contrast. He continues, I pointed the shape out to my girlfriend, and we both thought it had to be a cloud. Then we realized that it seemed to be moving. Then we thought it must be some sort of flat looking blimp. We could see no lights on it whatsoever, which we thought was very odd for an aircraft at night. So again, typical aircraft have the navigation and running lights. You have the white light in the middle. You have the red and green on either wing. You have the flashing white lights. A regular aircraft looks pretty standard. Like, you know what you're looking at. Okay, there's a plane. But you're seeing this object that has no lights on it. It's just this black triangle, which we hear time and time again. I've seen one myself. I will link to that video down below as well, so you guys can get that full story. I'm not going to take over this story. He continues, when we were approximately a half mile from home, we saw that the object was much larger and closer than we thought, and then it was moving over us. I slowed the car down to almost a stop and stuck my head out the window to see what it was. It made no noise at all and blocked out a very large portion of the stars. We hear this again so many times with these big objects, usually the triangles. They're black, and sometimes there's lights on them. And initially people will say, oh, it looked like three lights in formation, like planes. But then as it passes over the area between those 3 points of light, it blocks out the stars. So you can't necessarily see the craft because it's so dark out, but you can see that there's something blocking the stars. So really interesting. I was able to see that it was roughly triangular in shape, though I can't be certain of that fact because it all happened so fast and unexpectedly. I didn't see any visible markings or lights, and it wasn't moving at a high rate of speed. So some people have talked about like diamond-shaped craft, kite-shaped, which is diamond-shaped, which again, in a quick setting might look triangular. So he says, we both sort of laughed the whole thing off and never talked about it again. I've been at a loss ever since to explain what it was, since aircraft flying at night have some sort of lights. I'd also expect some sort of noise, even from a low-flying blimp, should one decide to float around in the dark at low altitudes. So really interesting. You know, they're seeing this large, dark, triangular craft, no noise, no lights, and which is interesting because, again, in a lot of the triangle sightings, there's lights. I saw a black triangle during the day at a distance. Couldn't tell if there were any lights on it. But at night, most of the black triangles usually have lights. Like I said, it's usually, one on each point and sometimes one in the middle or some on the back, like almost like a propulsion system. And those I tend to think maybe are more our aircraft, experimental. But this thing, he's just saying it was large and black and triangular, or dark and triangular, silently moving over them. And again, it sounds a lot like the old Warminster flap of silent craft. Just, they thought it was a blimp. and again, just why would any aircraft, conventional aircraft, be moving at night without any navigation lights on it? You don't want other things crashing into you. So it's either military or it's not ours. And make of that what you will. From another dimension, from another planet. I don't know, but it ain't ours. So very, very strange. But this is a cool sighting. I love these detailed sightings. A lot of the sightings on New Fork are like a sentence or two, and it's hard to get like real meat and potatoes stories here. And I love these more detailed stories. So let us move on. All right, next story. This is from Quakertown, Pennsylvania. And Quakertown is another town that was mentioned a lot in last week's episode's comments. This comes to us from July 15th, 2025. So a little over a year ago. 8-minute sighting. And this was at South 9th Street, seen out of a window. It was a red disc. So really interesting. The witness says, a red glowing craft flew level across the sky. 2 jets chased it. Not a meteor, asteroid, or plane. No up or down motion at all. It was completely red, the entire craft, as if it was burning, but they were all lights. It was not speeding to the ground. It flew evenly across the sky from south to north. As it was getting close to being out of my viewing range, coming from the east out of nowhere, traveling very, very fast, were 2 fighter jets going after whatever this craft was. It was not an asteroid, nor a meteorite, nor a burning plane. I say this because the trajectory of the craft stayed level, flying with no up or down movement at all. So interesting sighting. One, he's saying it was completely red, which again goes back to a lot of the Warminster sightings, which were orange. And Red is in, I think anything in that category. I mean, it wasn't blue, it wasn't green, red, orange, yellowish, amber. I kind of lump those all into the same basic category because people's perceptions are going to be a little different depending on time of day and all sorts of things. Uh, but he's saying it was moving very evenly across the sky. And again, a meteorite, a shooting star, other people are bound to see it. The news is going to report on it, especially if this was a year ago. You're not talking 20, 30 years ago when people didn't have cell phones at the ready. Other people would have seen this. The interesting thing to me is the two jets following it. A jet is not going to follow an asteroid meteorite. If this was an aircraft on fire, that would have made the news. People would have heard about that. Just interesting. And the two fighter jets, maybe from the base. I don't know. Again, not a ton of detail here, but I do like that it was this red disc, not an aircraft. He's saying it was like it was burning, but they were lights. It wasn't actually burning. It wasn't on fire. Happens very quickly. Doesn't get a good look at this. It goes out of his range of view, and two fighter jets go after it. And we hear this time and time again. And again, it doesn't mean that it's extraterrestrial. It could be foreign. It could be experimental, out of control. And now these jets have to shoot it down before it crashes in a residential neighborhood. I don't know. I don't think that every UFO is extraterrestrial or interdimensional or paranormal or whatever. I think a lot of them are probably just experimental craft, but this sounds weird, very strange. So yeah, little UFO sighting from Quakertown. All right, our next story comes to us from Levittown, which I had two stories last week of Bigfoot sightings in Levittown, and people were shocked because Levittown is pretty developed. So to see Bigfoot there, a little weird, but they're cool stories, very strange. So be sure to check out last week's episode as well, because some really interesting and bizarre stories from last week. But yeah, here we have Levittown, UFO. This comes to us from July 5th of 2024, so just about 2 years ago. Levittown, PA, and they say, I saw it from my bedroom window. My bad Beatles impression. I opened the windows and called my wife over to the witness. He says it was a red diamond. So this goes back to the previous story and a lot of previous stories. This red, orange, diamond, triangle, disc sort of thing. Says it was bigger than an average house. It was heading west. And they say it was red, flying north of our house in an east to west direction, silent, and watched it until it was out of sight. Seen on July 5th around 3:30 a.m. I got up to go to the bathroom and saw the object outside my window. I waited until it got past a tree that blocked my view. I woke up my wife to watch the object. The first thing she said is, "What is that? It's huge." I said, "I don't know. It's why I got you up to witness it." So not a lot of detail here, but they're seeing this red diamond. And I like when there's other witnesses, you wake up your wife in the middle of the night, 3:30 in the morning, to be like, "Come on, honey, come look at this UFO." And if it's not a UFO, you're getting a slap. Like, why did you wake me up? That's a plane, that's a cloud, that's whatever. So interesting that they both saw it. And then she said it's huge. So this big red diamond flying outside at 3:30 in the morning. So again, probably not a lot of people seeing it. Not a lot of people are awake at 3:30 in the morning. But again, I think it ties very well into a lot of the other sightings we're hearing of these diamond/triangular objects, the reddish orange light. We're not hearing greens and blues. We heard a white one, but lots of red and orange. So really, really cool and interesting to me. All right, so our last story of the night comes to us from Lake Nockamixon, Pennsylvania, which was also mentioned to me in the comments from last week's episode. People were mentioning just weird stuff around Lake Nockamixon. This story is from August 1st of 2005 at Lake Nockamixon. Circular shape, lights on the object, and they changed colors. Two balls of light pulsating from red to white, about the size of stars in the sky, moved in random directions and zigzagged back and forth, staying in the same general area of the sky. Stayed for over an hour and remained there after we left. So a very short story, but this is what we hear a lot in UFO stories, that they last a long time. They're not planes. Planes are transient. They just, they come and they go. A helicopter can stick around, but you're going to hear the noise and you're going to say, "Oh, that's a helicopter." He's saying these were zigzagging and pulsating from red to white. So again, we're hearing the red. We're hearing a lot of this in Bucks County, the red, moving in random directions, zigzagging. Conventional aircraft don't do that. The size of stars. So maybe not close, maybe high up in the sky. In the episode I've linked earlier at Bantam Lake, where we had seen some stuff, John and I were talking about our experiences at Bantam Lake in Connecticut, and John had seen something very similar to this. He said he saw lights in the sky, and his words, dancing around each other. So, almost like insects, but they weren't. He said he thought they were stars at first, and they were, kind of stationary, and then they started moving and dancing with each other. And this sounds very similar to this. Stars in the sky moving in random directions, zigzagging back and forth, staying in the same general area. So they're not planes. They're not moving to a destination. They're just kind of up there moving around. Don't know what to make of that. Don't know why extraterrestrials would come millions of light years here to just, dance around in the sky like that and zigzag. But they watched it for over an hour and they left and they were still up there. So they don't know what this was. I don't know what this was. Would love to hear your thoughts on this down below. So let me know. This is Lake Nockamixon, which again, a lot of people were saying weird stuff happens there. So I got to dig into that more for future episodes for just the high strangeness, not UFOs, not Bigfoot, but the other stuff. So, and apparently there's a lot of other stuff in Bucks County, which we will have to get into at some point. All right, everybody, there's some UFO sighting stories from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. When I love Pennsylvania. It's one of my favorite places. Loved Washington's Crossing. I haven't spent a ton of time in Bucks County, but, we've been to Doylestown. I'll link to that episode down below. I did cover UFO sightings in Bucks County before, but I really focused on just Doylestown because we had gone to a Ren fair there. But these are from other places in Bucks County, so very cool. I was going to touch more on ghosts and hauntings for this week, but I opted for the UFOs. I just said, the UFO stuff is very popular too. And ironically, my friends over at Slice of the Paranormal, they just dropped an episode earlier this week about ghosts and paranormal stuff at Washington's Crossing. So go check that out. I'm going to link to that below. They have an awesome podcast. They're good friends of the show. They've been on my show. I've been on theirs. They are awesome. Stephen, Ryan, Christy, Jill, who's behind the scenes, but Jill is awesome. They're all awesome. I just have so much fun with them, and I wish I lived closer to them. They're about 3 hours away. So story of my life. Most of my good friends live very far away, except John, who lives very far away in Great Britain. But yeah, 3 hours away, but they're awesome. So check out their episode. They talk about Washington's Crossing, and it's a nice little tie-in to this episode. So go check them out. In the meantime, everybody, question everything. I question these stories because I need more answers. We all do. We all have to question, what could these things have been? It doesn't mean we're trying to take away from the witnesses. They saw what they saw. Again, you've seen from some of these stories, there's not a ton of detail. They say it was huge. Well, what does that mean? Was that 100 feet long? Was that a mile long? People have different definitions. So I just wish there were follow-up investigations. I hope that some of these witnesses come across my show and contact me. It's happened before. And I get more details and more information. But these stories are, really cool. And I think they all tie in together. A lot of the red, a lot of the orange, similar shapes, all in Bucks County. So very cool. But question everything, everybody. Until next time, embrace the weird. Stay safe out there. Keep watching the skies, especially over Bucks County. And we will see you next week. Rock and roll, everybody.